Good afternoon. It is 12:30. Excuse me. Welcome to today's Professional Series webcast brought to you by the MSU Alumni Association. These webcasts are designed to help Spartans with business and professional related information that could help you in your career, help you with your company. Today's cast is one that I find to be extremely important and relevant, managing the immigration experience for employers and individuals. As many know, Michigan State has a strong base of international students who are studying skills that many feel are necessary in our current economy. But it's hard for some companies to figure out how to actually hire these individuals, how to make it work, why they should even try, and for individuals who are immigrants themselves, trying to figure out how to get themselves in front of companies is a challenge. So joining us today, Marc Topolewski. He's a great Spartan in the Detroit area. His firm has reached out to Michigan State on several occasions with initiatives involved around strengthening Detroit. And when asked if he would mind sharing his wisdom with over 15 years of experience in the corporate world navigating immigration, he jumped right in and said, sure. So to that, I say thank you to Marc, and I would like to turn the microphone over. Just a quick note, for those of you with questions for Marc, you may pose them in the chat area of this webcast. You will see the chat bar in the lower left-hand corner. Questions are welcome. And this webcast will be recorded. So if you would like a copy of this webcast at its conclusion, you may email Brenda in the address shown in the chat box. So without any more talking on my part, Marc, you are welcome.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Can you hear me okay? All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. I appreciate it. And welcome, Spartans, to this webcast today. I appreciate you joining us on your lunch hour to learn a little bit about immigration. Usually as an immigration attorney, we practice in a little bit of obscurity. It's kind of a niche area of law, and we tend not to get a lot of attention. But the last couple months, have been getting a lot of attention in the news. Immigration has been getting a lot of headlines, and immigration attorneys were kind of a bit of rock stars here lately. So you're catching me in the middle of my 15 seconds of fame. So anyways, without further ado, wanted to jump in and just really quickly introduce myself and then get going with the program. As Lisa said, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to enter them in the chat area. I'd like to keep this conversational, so if you have questions at any time, just feel free to jump in and I will do my best to address them. So as Lisa said, my name is Marc Topolewski. I am a Michigan State University graduate of the class of 1993. I graduated with a major in economics, and after Michigan State, went on to study law at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. I am now the managing attorney of Ellis Porter, which is an immigration boutique firm based here in Metro Detroit. Our main focus of our firm is, we are a comprehensive immigration firm, so we handle both employment-based immigration and family and individual-based immigration matters. Probably about 75% employment-based immigration, 25% of the family and individual immigration. On the employment side, we represent employers anywhere from startups to mid-size and companies and Fortune 500 companies in U.S. companies and foreign companies in the fields of automotive and engineering, technology, and healthcare primarily. And then on the family side, we also handle basically all matters that can come up for an individual seeking assistance with immigration. So we are not only a boutique immigration law that focuses just on immigration, but we are one of the few immigration firms that I would call a comprehensive immigration firm in that we have expertise on both the employment-based side and the family-based side. So one of the things, so here's what we're going to talk about today. The first thing is why immigration matters to Michigan. Why it's important to be having this conversation today, and what it means to and what immigration means to the future of our state. Then we'll talk a little bit about how the U.S. immigration system works in general. We'll talk about the different work visa and green card categories. available to employers and employees. We'll talk about employer compliance requirements, and then touch briefly on some of the individual immigration categories and citizenship, and then lastly talk about immigration reform update, which is again one of the hottest topics going right now in the news, and a lot to talk about there. So, why does immigration matter to Michigan? Well, immigration, Michigan here. We're like Lisa mentioned, we're here in Detroit, Michigan as well. This is a time of rebirth for the state and for the region, and we need all the help we can get to drive economic growth and drive our state and our cities forward. And one of the ways to do that is through immigration. Now, a lot of people think that's counterintuitive, that bringing more people here when we seem to be struggling is not a good idea, but it's actually just the opposite. The more talented people we can bring here and get them to come to Michigan and reside in our state and contribute to our economy makes the pie bigger for everyone, and it makes our economy more successful. So what is it about immigration that helps Michigan? And this is not just kind of philosophical ideas, but these are proven statistical information that shows how immigrants are making a difference to the U.S. economy and also to the economy here in Michigan. So first of all, immigrants, even especially here in Michigan, they tend to be very well educated, and they are much more likely than our native-born population to possess a 4-year college degree, and therefore tend to be very productive members of our society here in Michigan. Also, immigrants have proven to have higher educational skills in the STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and math, which are fields that are going to be critical to Michigan's success as we go forward in the new economy. As you'll see here in these statistics, almost between 40 and 50% of the graduates in the very technical fields in the United States are now foreign-born students. And one of the big initiatives going on right now in the United States, but in particular in Michigan, is to make sure that we retain these people. We spend a lot of resources educating them here in the state of Michigan. Again, almost 40 to 50% of our degrees are going to these foreign nationals. We need to do everything we can to convince them that Michigan is a great place to stay, to live, and to grow their careers, because it's a benefit to all of us. As these foreign nationals migrate into the workforce, again, very high percentage of them are engineers, doctors, scientists, all of the very critical and important positions we need more of here in Michigan, and that's why we need to attract as many immigrants to Michigan as we can. Immigrants also, at a much higher percentage than native-born citizens, tend to start high-tech and venture capital businesses, which again are the kind of businesses that will spur growth in our economy. As these statistics show, 25% of public companies were started by immigrants. Most notably, Google's a great example. I mean, where would we be without Google? Google was one of the companies founded by an immigrant. In Michigan, Michigan actually has a very good ranking as far as the number of immigrants starting high-tech companies. We rank third in the nation in that category, and in Michigan, a foreign-born individual is 6 times more likely than a native-born U.S. person to found a high-tech firm. And that's, again, another very critical reason why it's important that we do everything we can to track these here. At this point, I should mention, too, these statistics that I'm sharing with you are courtesy of an organization called Global Detroit, which is an organization that is spearheading a number of different efforts to help employers employ and retain foreign nationals, and working with schools to retain fresh graduates to the state of Michigan, and they're doing a lot of great things in the field of immigration, so you should check them out, globaldetroit.com. Immigrants are also very ingenious as far as coming up with new ideas and inventing new technologies. As this stat shows, 25% of patent applications are filed by immigrants, and in Michigan it's over 35%. Again, making it 6 times more likely then someone from not from the United States is going to be filing a patent and maybe creating the next big thing here in Michigan, and that's what we want to see. Immigrants are just generally tend to be more entrepreneurial. The statistics show that immigrants are 3 times as likely as native-born residents to start a business in here in Michigan. And I think we all know that Michigan traditionally has been a place where we count on a lot of big employers, but the new economy going forward is going to require all of us to start small businesses, to foster entrepreneurship, and there's no better way to do that than to encourage more immigrants to live in our state, because just by their nature they tend to be very entrepreneurial and a lot less risk averse than the native population, because usually most of them have already taken one big risk by leaving their country and establishing themselves in the United States. The statistics also show that immigrants are very productive and hardworking members of our society. I think sometimes people try to make the argument that they are a drain on the system, and the statistics just don't bear that out. For example, in Michigan, again, a higher percentage of the foreign-born population are of working age, contributing to our economy, paying taxes, than are the percentage of the non-immigrant population here in Michigan, which again, in a state that has an aging population in Michigan and a population where we have been losing people through out-migration, it's very important that we have this immigrant workforce here who have a very high percentage who are contributing to our economy. I just think this is a great example of the industriousness of immigrants, is that, for example, just here in southeast Michigan, the Hispanic population, who only makes up a little over 3% of the region's population, they comprise 6.5% of our total employment. So again, immigrants are not a drain on the system. They actually are a boost to the economy. And then just generally speaking, immigrants have the unique ability to be catalysts for growth, especially in urban areas. First of all, immigrants are not afraid to go into immigrant areas or urban areas. Sometimes where we see hurdles, immigrants see opportunity, and so they are not afraid to go into urban areas and start businesses, open stores, open restaurants, and bring a new energy and cultural diversity to those areas, helping to revitalize those urban neighborhoods. If you're following at all what Dan Gilbert's doing here in Detroit, what he's been saying is that to draw people to Detroit and other core cities in Michigan as well, there's this idea of placemaking. You have to, the place has to be, there has to be economic benefits to the place that you're trying to attract people, but there also has to be lifestyle benefits, and people want to come to a place that's diverse. They want to come to a place where there's lots of different cultural things that they can experience, whether it's restaurants, food, and art, and immigrants bring that kind of cultural diversity to a place to make it an interesting place for people to want to come and live and work and raise their family. So again, yet another reason why doing everything we can in Michigan to attract immigrants is a great policy for the state. So what I firmly believe, and I think again the statistics bear it out, that the success formula for Michigan going forward is that we have to promote immigration as a strategic tool for economic growth, and we have to do everything we can as a state to let immigrants know that the door is open here in Michigan. You're welcome. We want you here. We want you to be part of our team and to contribute to our economy, because as this cycle kind of indicates, immigration drives innovation. Innovation drives prosperity, and then when we have more prosperity, actually more people are going to want to come and immigrate here, and it's a cycle that continues to drive us forward. So that's why immigration is important, and that's why we're talking about it here today, and why Lisa thought it was such a timely topic to discuss. And so now I want to talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of how immigration works. And okay, so I have a question. How does Michigan compare to other states in terms of being immigrant friendly? I think certainly we are one of the more. Another report just came out from Global Detroit, speaking about the immigrant population in Michigan and the demographics. And one thing that report showed very clearly is that Michigan is a very diverse state. We not only do we have a fairly high number of foreign nationals living in the state, but we have foreign nationals from a lot of different countries. You'll have some states that have a large foreign national population, but they all tend to come from one or two different countries. In Michigan, we have a fair number, not as high as states like California or Texas or New York, but we do have a fairly decent number of foreign nationals living in the United States. But what's unique is that it's a very diverse collection of people from a number of different countries. And I think because of that, naturally, this is an area that tends to be more open to immigration than some other states. I do think there are some more things that we can do to make Michigan a more immigrant-friendly state, and I think part of it is just getting over the mindset as a state that we have that our economy is a limited-sized pie, and if more people are coming in, that somehow our piece of the pie is getting smaller, when it's just the opposite. The more skilled professionals we can attract to the state, the bigger the pie gets in Michigan, and the more we all have to share. So Michigan is doing a good job, but there's a lot more we can do, and I think we just really need to let all of the immigrants know around the world, Michigan is open for business, and we're very open and welcoming to people who are not from Michigan, or not from the United States. Okay, so just to kind of go into the nuts and bolts of the immigration system, I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of the immigration system in general. In the U.S. immigration system, a person has to get permission to come into the United States, and usually that permission is in the form of a visa, which is a document you apply for at a U.S. consulate outside the United States before you enter the United States. But when you're entering, you're usually entering in one of these, or you're here in the United States in one of these four categories. You're either here as a temporary, or what's called a non-immigrant visa, and that's just a visa that says that you're allowed to come to the United States for some specific purpose and for a specific limited period of time. And then when you're in the United States, you may have the opportunity to change that status, extend that status, but it is temporary in nature, and it's for a very specific purpose. You may also be here on a permanent visa, or what's called an immigrant visa, or the slang term is a green card. So a person who has a green card or who is here on an immigrant visa, they have the ability to stay here in the United States permanently. They're not U.S. citizens, however, they are called lawful permanent residents, but they do have the ability to stay in the United States for the rest of their life in this permanent resident status. Some individuals here are here who seek asylum, or they've come from other countries as refugees. And then lastly, foreign nationals who are here, ultimately become citizens, and they're here with U.S. citizenship. So everybody who's in the United States is in one of these classifications. They're either a temporary visa holder, a permanent visa holder, someone here from asylum or refugee status, or they're a U.S. citizen. Now, outside of that, obviously, as you've been reading in the news, we also have about 11 million people who are not in any of those statuses. Usually they either came into the United States legally, but then they overstayed, so maybe they entered on a temporary visa but did not leave when that visa expired. That's called an overstay. Or you have some people who did not enter legally. They entered illegally without being inspected by an immigration officer, and they entered without any documentation at all. So that's the kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to the immigration debate. What do we do with these 11 million people who are here without a lawful immigration status? The immigration system itself is managed by multiple federal government agencies. It is federal law. It's not governed by the state. It's governed by federal law. And there's been some disputes, as we saw with Arizona, about what the state can regulate and what the federal government regulates. But generally speaking, immigration is a federal law, and is governed by federal agencies, primarily the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the Department of State, which runs all the consulates outside the United States, the USCIS, they handle all the immigration within the country, and then the Department of Labor is involved in all the work visa applications to make sure that the interests of U.S. workers are protected. So let's talk about temporary visas. There are about 40 different types of temporary work visa categories. Some allow you to work, some don't allow you to work. I've just listed a few of the most common business and work visas that you may come across, and I'll just say a couple things about each of those to give you an idea what they involve. The B1 business visitor is actually not a work visa. It doesn't allow you to work at all, which can sometimes raise issues. But that's for a person who is a business person outside the United States, who wants to come to the United States to meet with a potential client or attend training or other kind of business meetings in the U.S. That business visitor visa allows them to come to the U.S. and participate in those activities, but it does not allow them to work or perform employment services in the United States. The E1 and the E2 visas, and as you'll see, all these visas are named after letters. That's just the letters that of the statutory provision in the regulations that create the category. So it's a bit of an alphabet soup, but that's the naming structure they've come up with. So the E1 and E2 visas are based on treaties. The U.S. has various immigration treaties with other countries, but not all countries, that allow certain individuals who are either performing a substantial amount of trade with the United States or they're investing in businesses in the United States. They can qualify for these E1 and E2 visas. Again, it works for certain countries, but not all countries, depending on whether or not the United States has a treaty with your country. Probably the most common temporary work visa is the H-1B visa, which is for specialty occupations, and that's defined as any professional job that requires at least a bachelor's degree level of education as a minimum requirement for the occupation. So that would cover your engineers, your computer professionals, but for example, jobs like a nurse, a registered nurse, where some nurses may have a bachelor's degree, but the minimum requirement for the occupation is only an associate's degree. That's an occupation that does not qualify for H-1B. The H-1B, another interesting thing about the H-1B visa category is there is a quota. There's only so many visas available in that category in a given fiscal year, and when they run out, there's no more left. And so the number is approximately 65,000. And this year, on the first day we could file for H-1B visas, April 1st, the H-1B numbers for the year were exhausted within the week. So it's become kind of a cumbersome system where there's a rush to file for the H-1B visas, and then they're gone in a very short period of time, and then the rest of the year businesses are going without the opportunity to be able to hire new H-1B workers. The H-2A and the H-2B categories are for your agricultural and seasonal temporary workers. There are also quotas for that visa as well. The J-1 exchange visa, that's a visa category governed by the Department of State. It was created to basically give individuals who are outside the United States the opportunity to come into the U.S., experience U.S. culture, and then take that back with them and share it in their home countries. The J-1 covers a lot of different areas, from everything from au pairs and camp counselors to research scholars at universities and resident physicians training here in the United States. So it's a pretty broad category. The next category, the L1, is the intercompany transfer category. That's used by companies with international operations who are looking to transfer one of their employees from abroad to the United States. Essentially, if you are a business and have operations outside the U.S., if you have an employee who is either a manager or an executive, or an employee who has some specialized knowledge of your company, and they've been working for you abroad for at least 1 year, you can transfer those individuals to work at your operations in the United States. The O1 is the Extraordinary Ability Visa, and it's reserved for individuals who are at the very highest levels of achievement in their fields. It's a very difficult visa category. You have to show that essentially you're one of the top 10% of people who do what you do in your occupation. But it can be used for very high-level scientists, high-level business people, high-level researchers, and it's a difficult category, but it's great when we can use it to get very special people here to share their skills in the United States. The P visa categories are for your athletes, artists, and entertainers. So sometimes it's professional athletes. It may be a musical group who's coming to perform in the U.S. They're going to be using the P visas. The R1 is the religious worker visa, so any religious organization, churches, synagogues, mosques who have employees, they can employ individuals in this R1 religious worker category. And the last one is the TN NAFTA professional. This category only applies to Canadian and Mexican citizens, and the Canadian or Mexican citizen have to be coming to the U.S. with a job offer to work in the United States in one of 62 professional occupations that are specifically listed in the treaty. So it doesn't apply to anybody who's Canadian or Mexican citizen. It only applies if you're coming to work in one of those specific occupations, which again are all professional level occupations, for the most part requiring a bachelor's degree, things like engineers. It does cover registered nurses, physical therapists, a broad category of engineering and medical, but quite limited on the business side as far as the occupations that are listed there. And obviously, because here in Detroit, being on the border with Windsor, Michigan tends to do a lot of work in the TN area. Now, as far as employment-based green card goes, so now we're talking about permanent resident status. So the other visas we discussed are temporary visas. Now we're talking about a person who wants to stay in the U.S. permanently, and typically before your temporary visa expires, if you want to stay longer and your employer wants you to stay longer, that's when you'll initiate the process to apply for an employment-based green card. There are 6 main green card categories. Some require labor certification, some do not. What labor certification is a process whereby before the employer can complete the sponsorship process of a particular employee, they have to show to the Department of Labor's satisfaction that there is a shortage or unavailability of U.S. workers with the specific skill sets needed to fill the position they are looking to fill with a foreign national. Now, on the temporary visa side, like for example in the H-1B category, there is no such requirement that you have to show an unavailability of U.S. workers or shortage of U.S. workers. You just have to, again, show that the person is in a specialty occupation and has the required education to perform the duties. But on the green card side, in some of these categories, there is a requirement that the employer does have to show this unavailability of U.S. workers, and they do that through a test of the labor market that the Department of Labor monitors very closely and mandates exactly what they have to do to make that showing. Some of these categories as well have quotas, and the quotas are by category as to how many green cards can be given out in a particular category in a given year, and then within each category there are limits on how many visas a particular country or people from a particular country can get in that category. So certain immigration countries that send a lot of immigrants to the United States actually will not only bump up into the category limits but also the per country limits, and those countries include India, China, and in some cases Mexico and the Philippines. So a quick summary of the green card categories. And the EB stands for employment based. So the EB1 is the employment based first preference category. With the EB1 category, there are three subcategories. There's one for extraordinary ability, which, again, very similar requirements to the O1 temporary visa we discussed. There's a category for outstanding researchers, so this is for individuals working at universities and other research institutions who can show that they're doing a high level of very important research. They can get a green card on that basis. And then the third category is for multinational managers. Companies, again, who have international operations have the ability to sponsor their managerial international employees for U.S. permanent resident status. The employment-based second preference, or EB2 category, and I should mention that the EB1 category, none of those require labor certification. You just qualify based on your merits and your ability to meet the qualifying criteria for those categories. The EB2 category, however, for most EB2 applications, you do have to go through the labor certification process, and this would be used by what are called advanced degree professionals. So anyone who's working in the U.S. in a job or being sponsored for a job that requires at least a master's degree level of education, or in lieu of that, a bachelor's degree plus 5 years of experience, those individuals are considered advanced degree professionals, and they can fall into this EB2 category. There is a special subcategory called national interest waiver, where if an individual can show that whatever they're working on is an important project in the national interest of the United States and to the benefit of the United States population, they can actually get a waiver of having to do the labor certification part and still get a green card under the EB2 category. The EB3 category is for, again, professional workers who at least have a bachelor's degree. It also covers what are called skilled workers, so people working in jobs that require at least 2 years of work experience to fill the occupation. Now in this EB2 and the EB3 category, again, in the EB3, everybody applying in this category is contending with a pretty significant backlog because the visa categories for all countries have been oversubscribed. More people are applying every year for EB3 green cards than there are green card numbers available. Just to give you an example right now, and then the backlogs are quite lengthy. So for example, right now in the EB3 category, an individual from Canada, let's say, who submitted their application in January 2009, is still waiting for the chance to finalize the process and get their green card. An individual from India applying in the EB3 category who applied in January 2003 is actually still waiting in line to finally get their green card in this category. The backlogs in EB2 only apply to people from India and China, and again, they're not as bad, but still in India and China, you have people who've been waiting since 2008 to finalize their green card process in that category. The EB4 category is probably one of the least used categories, but it's for religious workers and some other categories of special immigrants. The EB5 category is a category that's been getting a lot of attention lately, and this is also an investment-based visa category, and basically it's meant to spur individuals who want to make investments in the U.S. that are going to make clear and well-documented job creation opportunities in the United States. The way the program works is if an individual is going to invest in at least $1 million in a business in the United States that is going to create a certain number of jobs over the course of a couple years, then they can get a green card based on that investment in the EB5 category. I mean, these green cards in EB5 are conditional in that first you make the investment, you can apply for the green card, and the initial green card you get is conditional, and after 2 years you have to go back and show that the job creation benefits that you indicated actually came true. Also, individuals who are investing $500,000 in special targeted economic areas can also get a green card through this EB5 program. The last category I mentioned is the diversity immigrants, and there is a program called the Diversity Lottery, and basically the impetus of that program was that a lot of the individuals who tend to come through the employment-based categories 1 through 5 primarily tend to be from a certain smaller number of countries, and there are other countries from more the developing world and some other remote areas who tend not to get a lot of green cards in the United States through the normal channels, and so this was an opportunity to try to add some diversity to the immigrants that are allowed to come to the United States. So under this program, every year up to 50,000 people can be admitted under this diversity immigrant program, but sometimes they'll get as many as 10 million people will apply for these visas. So and it is a random lottery selection process. So if you are selected, it can be a very beneficial thing and fortunate for you. But a lot of people do try and are not successful in getting the diversity green card. I understand from Lisa that some people on the call may be employers or working for employers, and I just wanted to mention a little bit about employer compliance, because as an employer with all the work visas and the work-based green cards, the employer is acting as the sponsoring entity to the government, sponsoring this foreign national worker either for a temporary work visa benefit or a green card benefit. And because of that role as the sponsoring employer, the employer has numerous compliance regulations that they have to contend with when employing foreign nationals. Some of them can get quite tedious, and the penalties for not complying can be significant. Probably the most common compliance issue every employer has to deal with, and this is for people who are employing not just foreign nationals but anybody, is the I-9. The I-9 is the form that every employer has to have every employee fill out when they start employment to prove that the individual is authorized to work in the United States. So even if a person is a citizen of the U.S., they still have to fill out the I-9 to indicate that they have proper work authorization. Individuals who are not citizens have to also provide evidence of what gives them work authorization to work in the U.S., whether it's a green card or maybe a temporary work visa. And there are specific requirements as to how you complete these forms, how you maintain the forms, how you update the forms. And again, there can be significant fines for not completing the forms or completing them improperly. It's always a good idea to on a regular basis audit those forms to make sure you've done everything correctly, because if you do the self-audit, sometimes you can catch some things before they become a bigger problem. What we've been seeing lately is the Immigration Service stepping up their own audits of the I-9 and coming out to employers, sometimes randomly, sometimes based on complaints from employees, and actually asking to see the I-9s for an employer. And if that happens, typically they're going to find some issues, and there are going to be some fines that result. I tell my employer clients that there's no employer that does this 100% correctly, but as long as you can show good faith compliance, that you're doing everything you can to do the best job that you can, typically you'll come out okay in one of these audits. E-Verify is a relatively new program that is an additional step to verifying the employment authorization and identity of new employers. Right now, it's a voluntary program nationally. Some states have made it mandatory, and in fact, and some counties in Michigan. Well, so in Michigan, it's not mandatory at the state level, but it is some certain counties, Oakland and Macomb, have made it required for businesses that are contracting, are contractors with the county. So right now in Michigan, those are the only employers who would be required to do E-Verify, but at the state level, it's not a mandate yet. But it is a program that if the employer signs up for it, there's an online website that you would input some of the employee's information into, and then that system would check that information against various government databases and give the employer back an indication of whether or not this person is who they say they are, and if they're cleared to work based on the work authorization information in the system. Initially, when the program came out, there was a lot of criticism because seemed to be a lot of holes in the government's database, and there was a lot of erroneous mismatches coming out of the system. But the government seems to have taken some steps to improve the database, and we seem to be seeing less and less of these kind of problems with the system. However, we've taken the position with our employers that until this becomes mandatory, it's probably not a great idea to do it as an employer, because it does add to your compliance obligations and potential liabilities. Although one of the benefits of doing it is that if you run a person through the system and it turns out that the system said that they checked out, but it turns out that they had some bogus documents, that you kind of have a safe harbor because you did e-verify. There are also some situations with F1 students, who we'll talk about in a little bit, where if you are an e-verify employer, you may have the ability to extend those students' post-graduation work authorization for longer than normal, but only if you're an e-verify employer. Other compliance requirements for employers mostly center around H-1B. With the H-1B, there is a prevailing wage requirement that you have to show that for all H-1B workers that you're paying them at least the prevailing wage for that occupation in the location where they're working, and the Department of Labor has very strict requirements on what documentation you have to keep on file to show that you met those prevailing wage requirements. The USCIS has also been conducting H-1B site visits to confirm that if you file an H-1B petition with the Immigration Service stating that you're hiring a particular employee to do a particular job in a particular location and confirming their salary requirements, the Immigration Service has been coming out to the employers to actually see if those people actually really work for the employer, if they're doing the job that you said they were doing, if they're getting paid what you said they were getting paid. And so it's very important that not only do you make sure when you prepare your H-1B petitions that you do so accurately without any misrepresentations, but that you and your staff have also been counseled on what to do in the case of one of these site visits and how to handle the questions that you're going to get from one of the site auditors. And then the last big record-keeping requirement has to do with the PERM process, which is the acronym for the Labor Certification Process. And again, the Department of Labor has some very specific requirements as to not only how the employer goes about testing the labor market to show that there are not any available U.S. workers, but then also what documentation the employer has to keep, showing that they actually did the required steps at the required times. So employer compliance and immigration seems to get stickier every day, and it's one of those things, like most compliance areas, where it's just best to do your best to stay on top of it, because if you let it slip, there could be big problems down the road. Wanted to just touch briefly on individual immigration and citizenship issues. We're talking initially there about employment-based visas and work visas and work green cards. Now we just want to talk about the individuals and what type of visas they may be here on and what their options are on pursuing permanent resident status without having the sponsorship of an employer. Some of the common temporary visas for individuals would include the B2 tourist visa. So that's if you have a couple from France who wants to come to the United States to see Traverse City for the first time, they're coming here on a B2 tourist visa. Certain countries, certain individuals from certain countries qualify for a program called the Visa Waiver Program, which says that if they're from one of these countries, which tend to be mostly European countries and maybe countries like Japan and Australia, if they're coming to the United States as a visitor for a period of 90 days or less, they actually don't even have to go to a U.S. consulate to get a tourist visa. They can just show their passport at the border and be admitted as a tourist for up to 90 days. So as long as their trip is less than 90 days, those individuals don't even have to get a visa. Another common temporary visa for individuals is the F1 student visa. So any individual who's coming to the United States to study at Michigan State or God forbid U of M, they are coming in the F1 student category. That category is typically governed for the most part by the schools, and it allows the individual to stay in the U.S. for the the duration of their course of study, whether it's a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, PhD degree, whatever it is. As part of that F1 student status, the individuals do have the ability, while they're studying, to conduct part-time work in their field, and that's called curricular practical training, or CPT, and the school can authorize that student to work almost in a co-op type setting with an employer. And then also, after the student graduates from their program of study, they're eligible for a year, 12 months of what's called optional practical training, or OPT, work authorization, which again allows them to go out and get a job in their field and apply what they've learned. Now, by the time that 12 months of OPT ends, the individual has to either have made plans to move into another work visa category, most commonly H-1B, or at the expiration of that OPT, they would have to either re-enroll in another study program or leave the country. Like I mentioned, in some cases the students can extend that 12 months of OPT work authorization for an additional 17 months, but only in cases where their degrees are STEM qualifying degrees and where the employer who's employing them is enrolled in E-Verify. So that can be a nice benefit for some F1 students. But again, this is a real target of a lot of the initiatives in Michigan, is to make sure that when we expend the resources to educate these bright individuals from foreign countries here in Michigan, that we want to do everything we can to make sure that they stay and apply everything they learned here to benefit us and our economy. And that's really been a big focus for Global Detroit, and I know Governor Snyder as well. As far as green cards go, there are certain family sponsorships that can be done to help get a relative a green card. It has nothing to do with employment, has nothing to do with having a job with a particular employer. These green card categories are based solely on the fact the person's relationship. So U.S. citizens are allowed to sponsor their immediate relatives, which would include their spouse, children, and parents. U.S. citizens can also sponsor their adult children, married and unmarried, and also siblings. Permanent residents also, so green card holders, also have the ability to sponsor spouses and adult children as well. Now, in these various family categories, like the employment side, there are quotas. There's only a certain number of visas available in each of these categories, and in a lot of these categories there can be some pretty lengthy waits. By law, there's never a wait, an extra wait for the immediate relative. So a U.S. citizen who marries someone from Canada can pretty much get them a green card relatively quickly, normally within about 6 months, and not have to wait for any longer backlogs. But pretty much every other category has some pretty significant backlogs, and it can be a long wait to get a green card for that relative. So you can start the sponsorship process, but it may be a few years or many years before that individual can actually come to the United States and join you in permanent resident status. And just to give you an idea, I mean, although the waits in some of the employment-based categories sounded pretty long, in some of these family-based categories, they're even worse. And I always like to point out the worst one right now is if you are a person from the Philippines seeking to, a U.S. citizen born in the Philippines who is seeking to sponsor one of your brothers or sisters. If you filed your application in January 1990, you are still waiting for that family member to come and join you in the United States. So pretty lengthy waits. The last category I want to talk about is citizenship. So for the most part, people, like I said, if you're here as a permanent resident, there's no requirement that you ever have to file for citizenship, but if it's something that you want to do, you can. For people who obtain their green cards based on employment, Typically, after 5 years of being a permanent resident, they would become eligible to be a U.S. citizen, and they could make an application for citizenship. Now, to apply for citizenship as a person who got their green card through a family relationship, in some cases they can apply in 3 years for U.S. citizenship. To qualify for U.S. citizenship, you have to meet a U.S. language speaking requirement, a U.S. language reading requirement. You will have to take a test on U.S. history and civics and government and pass that test. And then also you have to show that you've met certain requirements for residency in the United States, that you've actually been physically present in the United States for the majority of that 5 years you've been waiting to apply. So again, you can apply for citizenship after a certain period of time, but you never have to. If you apply for U.S. citizenship, depending on what country you're from, you may be able to retain your home country's citizenship as well. The policy of the United States government is that it recognizes dual citizenship, so the fact that you are a U.S. citizen does not mean that you still cannot be a citizen of another country. The U.S. government is fine if you're a citizen of the U.S. and Canada, let's say. Canada is the same way. But there are certain countries that their law says that if you take on the citizenship of another country, like the U.S., then you automatically give up your citizenship. India is one of those countries. Germany is a country where before you apply for U.S. citizenship, you have to get special permission from Germany, and only certain people are granted that permission to get it. So U.S. recognizes dual citizenship, but the individuals from may or may not recognize dual citizenship. The last thing, I know it looks like we're getting close to the end here, so I think we're doing pretty good on time. The last thing I wanted to bring up was, again, the immigration reform and everything that's going on with that. It's been kind of a busy month and a half as far as immigration reform goes. Very positive bill came out of the Senate, and that seemed to indicate that maybe we had some positive momentum to finally get this passed. I mean, we've had a couple false starts. I think it was 5 years ago, and before that, it's really been more than 25 years since we've had any significant immigration reform, and it's clear the system is broken. Again, we have to find out a way to deal with all the people who are here in the United States that don't have a legal status, and realize that there are certain people who would like to come here and be productive, but there just aren't any available categories that allow them to do that. We have these massive backlogs in green card categories. We have an H-1B quota system that runs out in a week. So the system is broken and it needs to be fixed, and the immigration bill that came out of the Senate was definitely a huge step in the right direction. That bill, some of the highlights of that bill is, one, it was very strong on border security, had a number of border security measures to make very large investments in strengthening the security presence along mostly the southern border and beefing up enforcement efforts. The Senate bill also created a path to citizenship for these 11 million estimated people who are living in the U.S. illegally. They could be given what's called a registered provisional immigrant status, or RPI status, which would allow them, which they would have to, one, pay a fine to get, but then after 10 years in this status and showing that they haven't had any serious criminal convictions, that they've been paying their taxes, haven't had any other issues, then after 10 years they could pay another fine and apply for a green card. And then after a green card, within the normal waiting period time, 5 years, whatever, then they could apply for U.S. citizenship. So it's a 10-year path to a green card, and even longer to a citizenship. But there is a path to citizenship, again, as long as the person has a clean criminal record, has paid their taxes, and pays the fines as part of this process. The Senate bill also, though, makes it a shorter track for younger people who were brought to the United States by their parents illegally, gives them a faster track to get to that green card and to get to citizenship, based on the idea that a lot of these children were brought to the U.S. when they were infants and don't know any other place than the United States as the country they call home, and it seems it's more equitable to give them a faster path to legalization. The Senate bill also addresses some issues with the high skilled workers. It would increase the H-1B cap and also put a mechanism in the H-1B cap where it can kind of fluctuate based on market need instead of just having a set number that's kind of set arbitrarily. It would also create a startup visa for entrepreneurs looking to come to the U.S. to start a company, a special merit-based visa that would be given to people who score a certain number of points based on their education, employment, and other considerations. The Senate bill would eliminate the diversity lottery program. It would also create a new, for low-skilled workers, create a couple new visa categories, one called the W visa for mostly construction jobs and hospitality industry jobs, and also a new agricultural worker visa. On the family side, one of the changes is that it would take away the ability of U.S. citizens to sponsor siblings anymore. So that's one point of contention. And then as far as employment verification goes, within 4 years, the Senate bill would make it mandatory that all employers in the United States have to use E-Verify. So that could be on the horizon. Now, the debate obviously now is in the House of Representatives, and it's not clear what's going to happen there. The main points of they've made it pretty clear that they don't want to vote on the Senate bill as it's been presented to them. So they're looking to come up with their own bill or put together some other piecemeal legislation. But the main points of contention between the Republicans in the House and the Senate seem to be one, the structure of these border security provisions, and then also this the path to legalization. Whether or not anyone here illegally should actually ever be able to apply for citizenship, and a lot of the Republicans in the House take the position that should not be the case, whereas the Democrats have made it very clear that they want a program where that eventually, over time, that everyone has a path to be legalized so they can contribute to the United States, contribute their taxes, and be contributing members of the society. The latest kind of compromise that seemed to have come out of the House this last week is some noises out of the Republicans that maybe they would be willing to grant a full path to legalization and citizenship for these for the younger individuals who are brought to the U.S. illegally by their parents, or some call them the Dreamers, because there was an act called the DREAM Act that was introduced that would help young people in that situation. And the Republicans have suggested that maybe they would consider allowing those people a path to citizenship, but not everybody else. But that compromise has not been met with much enthusiasm from the other side. So it's yet to be seen what's going to happen with immigration reform. The August recess is coming up, and congressmen are going to get an earful from their constituents on this, and we're hoping that they understand that they need to do something. The system is broken. We need to fix it. We need a smart, strategic immigration plan in place, and then and that will move our economy forward. So hopefully they get this done, but we will have to wait and see. So stay tuned. So I guess just in closing, once again, just wanted to thank you for your attention today. Thank Lisa for the invitation to speak to my fellow Spartans. It's very much an honor, and just wanted to let everybody know that this immigration stuff is complicated. It's definitely a niche area of law. That's why we've decided to focus 100% of our practice just on immigration, because it changes so frequently. There's so many intricate details. There's one study that came out that said it's the only law more complicated than the immigration law is the tax code. So it's a very complex, ever-changing law. and it can benefit you to use an immigration attorney to help you navigate through that process. So if any of you ever have questions, please feel free to contact me. My contact information is listed there. And then if you mention that you listen to us on this webcast, we will make sure you get a free consultation to talk about any immigration questions that you have. Thank you.
Hi folks, sorry about that. It's Lisa, my audio cut out. Mark, thank you so much for your presentation.